Hello everyone, and this is my screencast to show you an example of how you might navigate some of the library databases. This is a companion video to the article that I wrote for our content module this week, and I'd really encourage you to use both of these resources as guides, but not as exhaustive lists of what you can or cannot do. As I've emphasized in the written portion of this piece, research is an art, and every outlet that you can use requires a lot of exploration and play. So it's not something that you can study and then use perfectly. It's something that you keep using, and each time you use it, you come to understand it a little bit more, and you eventually will be able to use it pretty effectively. So here I'm at the library's homepage for Ohio State. That's library.osu.edu. I'm going to start by using WorldCat or World Catalog, and this is a resource that tries to include a lot of things across the world. You find a lot of libraries' holdings, but more importantly, you find a lot of digital resources. And the important distinction to make here is that you're not finding resources that were digitally published necessarily, but most of the things that you'll find through these online databases are things that were published in print and then scanned as a PDF or other file and included in these databases. So it's not like WorldCat is a publisher. It's not, any kind of provider of original material. It's simply a portal through which you can access all of these other materials. So first rule is that you always use the advanced search option. Google's fine, in its method of simply typing in one or two words, but for these more directed searches, you'll want to use the advanced option. So here I'm going to click on advanced search. So here we're taken to a few options. I'm going to kind of pass over the selecting a database because we'll just search all of them. But if you wanted to refine your options a little bit more, you could select which databases you wanted to search. So this means that WorldCat is sort of a mega database. It's a database of databases, which is kind of complicated when you think about it. So that's why I'm not really going to talk about it that much. The two options that you'll want to use, no matter what engine you're using, are the keyword or the title options. I found that subject is pretty problematic. In the end, it's always a data entry person that's putting this stuff into a database, and the subject keywords are never quite as good as the regular keywords or the title searches, so I'd encourage you to stay within those. I'm going to stick with keywords here for my search, and this is all based on the sample primary source analysis that I wrote from the introductory montage from Contagion, the 2011 film. And a lot of what I wrote about in that primary source analysis has to do with the way that that clip is playing with the idea of touch. So here I'm going to say that I'm brainstorming search terms, and at least three terms that I've come up with are Contagion, because not only is that the title of the film, but that's also the concept that the film is examining. And let's say I want to do touch as well as a search term, because I want to find some sources that are speaking to this theme of touching objects. And then let's say I search for bodies as well, because I think two of the things that we see in this clip are the relationships of people's bodies with inanimate objects that they touch, and then either transmit infection or receive infection as a result of that touching. So now I have an option to only return peer-reviewed articles. I'd encourage you to use this if you have that option in whatever database you're using. This means that you get sources that have been, as the title suggests, reviewed by peers, or in other words, before an editor or a publication has published this article or book that you find, it means that a panel of experts in that field have reviewed whatever it is and approved it, and they said, yes, this is something that ought to be published. It's good, the research is solid, and it's making a big contribution to our knowledge. So this is just a way of ensuring that you're getting high quality sources. When it comes to the year or the date limitation, I'd encourage you to take something fairly conservative at first. So I'm doing just everything since 2010. It depends on the field, on the idea. There's really no absolute limit here. Like, I'm not going to say that everything more than 10 years old is bad, because there's a lot of classics out there, I think, that would really inform your research. For example, there's a Susan Sontag essay called Illness as Metaphor that may inform a lot of your projects, and that was published in the late 70s. And I still think is very relevant today. So it just kind of depends on the project and the source. But for now, I'm going to say the last 6 years, just to be easy. And then for format, I would encourage you to select either article or book. All these other things, journal, map, music, musical store, website, sound recording, it's just kind of confusing to have all the formats selected. So I'm going to do one round here as article to see what comes up. So I've selected my keywords. I've said only return peer-reviewed articles. I've set a limitation for 2010 to 2016, it's publication dates, and I just want to see articles. So I'm going to click search. This is just one time that I've done this. Research involves doing this over and over and over again. It's never really just the first time. All right, so I have, as you can see up here, results 1 through 10 of about 41. This is actually a really good result. If you get somewhere between like 25 and 50 results, that means you've done really well with your search terms. If you get something like thousands of results, you should probably think about how you might further narrow down your search terms, or think of more specific terms that you might search for. Now, if you only get like 5 sources, then maybe you're being too specific, and you might think of more general search terms. So I'm going to start. First thing that you do is just look at the title. Go ahead and judge a book by its cover. If the title seems totally irrelevant to what you want to read about, then just pass it over. Your time is valuable here. For example, my third option here, the ethical attribute stigma, understanding when ethical attributes improve consumer responses to product evaluations, that has like nothing to do with what I want to research, so I'm not even going to bother looking at it, right? But look at this. My second option is the tactile topologies of Contagion. And because Contagion is in italics, that's the title of an artistic work, I'm assuming that probably is even about the movie. So I'm going to click on the title. And so here we notice that we have lots of different authors, or do we? No, it's just 2 authors, but they have really long titles. And the publication here is Transactions of the Institute of British Geographers, which sounds pretty stuffy and tweedy, but I'll go for it. And here, notice we also have a summary, so you can actually read a full summary sometimes of the articles before you look at them. And here the summary is a little difficult to understand. It's using a lot of technical words. But as I'm reading it here, I'm saying, maybe this probably has something to do with my interest in touch, in bodies, and contagion in this film, in the way that it's portrayed. So what I'm going to do here is I can view the full text. You're always going to have this option in every database. It's going to be in a different place in the interface, but you'll have the option to view the full text if you can. So I'm going to click on that. And I might have to input my credentials again, or not. So it takes me to the Electronic Journal Center. So the tactile, I have to click on it again. And sometimes you just have to do this. You have to keep clicking on stuff to find where you can download it. But here I have an option for PDF full text, so I'm going to download that. It's waiting for it. Cool. So here I get the PDF of this article. And notice, it's a lot of text, but I'll need to take the time to read over this. Now, what are some good strategies if you want to kind of determine whether you use this article or not. Typically, as you can see here, this has been broken into different parts, and the first section is titled an introduction. I would definitely encourage you to read the introduction to whatever source you've chosen at the outset. Read the first couple of pages of the introduction, and if after reading those first couple of pages it seems like this source is still kind of relevant to what you want to investigate, keep the source. You can download it. So here in Chrome, we have like a little download option off to the right, or you can like right click on it and say save as and save it to your desktop. So you can access the PDFs that way. So that would be an interesting source for me to look at. So I'm going to go back here. Here we go. I'm back to WorldCat. I'm going to go back to my search results, because that was just one. I'm going to keep looking at some of these options here. Now, as you can see, and this is the problem with search algorithms, some of these have nothing to do. And I really have no idea how I got influence of fungal odor on grooming behavior of the termite with my search results. So obviously I'm not going to look at that. Go into the next page. Now I have a Facebook photo with eating disorders. I don't really know how that has to do with contagion, touch, and bodies, but maybe it does. Okay, so it seems like a lot of these results aren't really doing, what I want them to do. I'm kind of spiraling out into different areas. So what I would do at this point is I would go back, all the way back to here. I would come up with some different search terms, and I would throw them in again, or maybe expand my years from maybe 2000 to 2016, or I'd go here in my format and select book instead of article, and I'd search again. And then I might change some of these search terms. But for the purpose of this little screencast, I'm going to go ahead and leave WorldCat. So that's one of the resources that you have. I'm going to go back to the library page. Now I'm going to go to the research databases list, and this is over to the right-hand side of the screen. So WorldCat was a database of databases, and it advertises itself as kind of this universal portal, but it isn't everything, and it doesn't include everything. The reason I like the research databases list is because you can search by subject matter. So maybe you don't want to have to wade through all these weird articles about like termites and fungal odor and stuff. You just want to get articles that are about biology, they're about architecture, etc. I'm just going to go straight to a database that I use a lot, but you could search through these subject areas and find some journals. But I'm just going to go for Project Muse, which you can use too. Project Muse is good because it has a lot of humanities-based publications in it. So here's the main page of Project Muse, and this is a good example of how the interfaces will look slightly different, but they will have the same options. So in WorldCat, we had the option for advanced search, and before I go there, I do want to note here in the research areas, you can further break it down into topics if you want to do that. So medicine and health is one of them. I might click on there in a minute, but I'm going to go to the advanced search option up here on the top right of the screen. Always do the advanced search because it just gives you more ways to filter and narrow down your results, because there's just millions of things out there. Here, content or title, so content I think is another way of putting keyword, are the two ways that I might search. And so I'm going to put in the same terms, contagion, touch, and bodies. I'm going to go ahead. I have some limitations over here on the left-hand side. I'm really just not going to bother with it right now. So let's just see what happens when I don't limit my results at all. Okay, so I have here 4,225 results. Obviously I can't go over all of them, but let's just see what happens. So my first result looks kind of promising, Contagion in Culture, an article from American Literary History. So I'm going to click on the title. And so here it links me directly to an HTML version of this article, but as you notice at the top left-hand side, there's a link, access article in PDF. So again, you could download this article and save it to either your computer or a flash drive or up to your cloud storage in either Google Drive or iCloud. So this is a way that you can organize your information, even if you're like at a school computer, it's not your own personal device, etc. So I might read through this article here, which seems to be dealing with the concept of contagion and how, culturally speaking, we imagine contagion. See, one of the subheadings, contagion as metaphor. So what I would learn if I read this in depth, and I'm kind of cheating here because I prepared this, but is that this is an introduction to a special issue of a journal. So I might want to include this in my research and read that a little bit more carefully. But another thing that I'm going to do here is scroll down to the works cited. And this is one of those research methods that I outlined in another part of this reading here. You can look through a works cited list, and this is where you can find some other sources that might be relevant to your research that you might not come across. So here it looks like we have some historical pieces, metaphors of invasion in 19th century literature, science, and politics. And cholera fever in English medicine, 1825. So it looks like there's some historical work here. Maybe not exactly what I'm looking for. But look, we have this Susan Sontag's illness as metaphor. That looks interesting. And so I might use this as a way of finding other sources, and then I would go check out Susan Sontag's illness as metaphor. But this is just a good example of how you might use a works cited list as a database to search. Okay, so I'm going to go back. I'm going to keep looking at my results here. And I judge things by their cover. If the title of the source doesn't look relevant, I skip over it. Oh, here we go, Contagion as Metaphor. It's from the same issue of American Literary History. So Cynthia Davis is the author, and you can click on the author to find out information. Typically the authors of peer-reviewed texts are going to be professors or professionals. I might read some of this article and decide I really want to use this, for my primary source analysis and moving into the secondary source integration, which you don't have to worry about right now. So again, I could access this in PDF and then save it to my computer. So 2 good sources so far. I'm going to go and say I want to see the next page, the next 10 results. So obviously some of these are not exactly relevant, and this is what you'll discover is no matter how specific you are in your search terms, this is it's an art, not a science, because you never know what's going to pop up. Oh, so here's something interesting. So this is a book, Contagion, Health, Fear, Sovereignty. I mean, that kind of seems like it has a lot to do with the ideas that I have in looking at that clip from the movie Contagion. So I'm going to click on this, on the book title, Contagion. So this is the cool thing about Project Muse. Some of these databases include entire books that you can look at. So this is a book from 2012, pretty recent. Essays examine the language of epidemiology used in the war on terror, the repressive effects of global disease surveillance, and films and novels that enact the perplexities of contagion in a global context. So cool. This looks like it has a lot to do with what I want to talk about. And I can look at this table of contents and say, this is a whole book. That's overwhelming. I don't want to deal with 400 pages of academic writing. You can pick out which chapters you think would best work. And unless there is a specific chapter in a book that is exactly about what you want to talk about, you should first go to the introduction. So what I'm going to do is go straight to the introduction here. I'm going to download the PDF. And I'll perform the same kind of operation as I would to the other article that I talked about. I'd read the first few pages. So I'd read these pages here, and then maybe to page 3 or 4, and I'd say, does this sound like it's going in the right direction for me? Does this seem like it's talking about the ideas in the way that's going to be useful for me, so that I can think about my research project in more deep and sustained ways? So I might want to save it, save this chapter, and always record exactly what you found for citation purposes later. Okay, so this is interesting. Here's a good instructive lesson. So right below the book that I was just looking at is a book review. So anytime you see in parentheses review, that means that this is an article reviewing something that someone else did. These generally speaking, are not good ideas for secondary sources, but what they will do is point you in the direction of a good secondary source. So Contagious, Cultures, Carriers, and the Outbreak Narrative, that sounds like a really relevant source to what I'm talking about. So I'm going to click on it. And lo and behold, it's Cynthia Davis again. We were looking at one of her articles before, and you'll find that as you start to narrow down your search and you start to pick out a conversation that's happening amid the millions upon millions of publications out there, you'll start to become familiar with the players, especially when you narrow your search to like the past 10 years or something. There are only so many scholars and professionals publishing in academic venues about very specific ideas. So that's kind of a cool effect, that you go from this massive ocean of research, and with time and patience, you start to notice this very specific network of communication. Or at least I think that's cool. So here, this is Cynthia Davis's review of Priscilla Wald's book, Contagious, Cultures, Carriers, and the Outbreak Narrative. So what would happen here is I would read this review of the book, and based on Cynthia Davis's review of the book, I would say, do I want to look at this book for my project? And I can say, I do. I want to look at this book. So I'm going to go up into searching for a title here. I'm going to say Contagious, Cultures, Carriers, and the Outbreak Narrative. So I'm searching for the book title. Notice that I'm putting it in quotation marks. When you put anything in quotation marks, it means that whatever search engine you're using is going to search for those words in that exact order. Otherwise, if I didn't use quotation marks here, it's going to find any source that has those words in any order, and I don't want that. So I'm going to search. So no results found. This happens sometimes. So I'm going to take the quotation marks out, search again in title. No results found. Okay, so I can't find it in Project Muse. So what I'm going to do now is go back to Ohio State Libraries. So I'm going to remember the title, Contagious, Cultures, Carriers, and the Outbreak Narrative. Going all the way back, or what I can do is just say OSU Library, library.osu.edu. Now I'm going to search in Ohio State's library holdings. I'm going to say books and more. So this is OSU's actual catalog. I'm going to say Contagious, Cultures, Carriers, and the Outbreak Narrative under title. And whenever you're searching for these longer titles, go ahead and eliminate all the punctuation marks, because that can confuse a lot of search engines. All right, so here it is. The book is showing up from Ohio State Lima campus library stacks. It's due, so someone has it checked out already. It's due May 26th. That's actually probably me that has it checked out. But, we have a web resource too. So I scroll down, we have an electronic resource. We'll see how this works. So we have a link to the table of contents. Okay, that's just a record for it. So how do I access? Okay, connect to resource. Access restricted to OSU patrons only. Cool, so this is ProQuest's eBrary. And this is kind of cool that you get to read it online. The thing that's really annoying about eBrary, if you ever end up here, is that you have to read it online with their awkward interface. I don't think you can download. You can download by chapter. Okay, so I could do a chapter download here, a maximum of 39 pages. Or current chapter. Okay, so I could do that. I could download one chapter. If I read this, it said contagious, I'm going to scroll down to the table of contents, see what's going on here. Here we go. So we have an introduction. We have, some chapters about Patient Zero, AIDS, Typhoid Mary. Maybe I don't really have a good idea of what this book is doing, so I'm going to start with the introduction, as I always should. Sometimes it's hard. Here we go, table of contents. I just click introduction. Okay. And so here I could download this chapter, the introduction. But first I would read the first couple of pages and say, does this sound like it's going in the right direction? And I'd say, yes, it does. It sounds like it's talking about bodies and touching and contagion and what all of this means for us as human beings. How do we think of ourselves and our relation to other people? So I would download this chapter, perhaps the introduction. Maybe after reading the introduction, I'd choose a chapter that I wanted to go to here. Maybe the introduction is enough. But this is another example of how you can find some pretty good sources. From a book review, remember, I just saw a review of this book, then I remembered the title, and I tried to find the book itself. Articles and books, two of the main sources. So this was just an introduction on how to use the sources at hand. I really think that this takes practice. It's going to be a little bit frustrating at first, and you're going to feel like there's so much out there you just don't know what to do. The point is to just be with it and just play around with the interfaces of each of these library databases and just find the most specific way you can search for sources. And we can, of course, talk one-on-one about all of that. So for now, I'm just going to say that this is good, and I invite any questions that you have about the research process.